Welcome back to the final entry in our technology and work-life balance event. And this is from Dr. Rosie Robinson, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome her to the event. Dr. Robinson is the principal investigator of the Balance Network, which supports a network of academics around the world on the themes of work-life balance in the digital age. So she's absolutely perfect to speak to you today. Rosie was also the principal investigator on the Digital Epiphanies project, which explored the use of digital tools to increase reflection and help support self directed changes in behaviour. This session is perfect because it's going to give you an excellent overview of the tech and work life balance landscape, and in particular, how it relates to you and in your work life balance pursuits. So, please enjoy this session with Dr. Rosie Robison. So Rosie, yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, what's your kind of journey to be working on this topic of technology and the workplace, and yeah, how did you come to be working here?
Sure. So, yeah, I'm Rosie Robison, and I'm a senior research fellow. I work at an academic institute called the Global Sustainability Institute, which is at Anglia Ruskin University in Cambridge in the UK. And I guess my journey, yeah, is not completely obvious. My interests broadly in my research are really around sustainable consumption. And I got interested in this area because of the way that digital technologies are allowing us, for example, to monitor and track areas of our lives that we never used to be able to. So in particular, around sort of energy consumption, home energy consumption. But through that interest, I guess, I got involved in a number of projects which were looking at digital technologies more broadly and how they're really reshaping lots of aspects of our lives, and this idea about work-life balance. We'll come on to talk a bit more about the Balance Network, which I'm involved in, but really this idea of work-life balance I take to be a more broad question, really, about how digital technologies are, well, exactly as I said, reshaping our work life, our home life, how those two interplay, and the whole package of things, really. So that was sort of how I got into the area in the first place, if you like.
So, Rosie, I wonder if you can share with us now just what the research actually says about the effects of constant connectivity, not only on our productivity, but in general, with our well-being in the workplace. What does the research actually say?
Sure, absolutely. So when you look at a lot of the literature in this area, then it's quite normal for there to be sort of opening section, really, in a paper or whatever, which is talking about the way that technology brings us this enormous amount of flexibility. And this has a lot of positive benefits for us. We're able to arrange things around other commitments. I mean, you think of, obviously, childcare is one, but, other caring commitments as well. And, people being enabled into the workplace who weren't able to. But at the same time, sort of in the same breath, this connectivity brings a feeling of perhaps being always on. And people often experience this as bringing some negative experiences to them, really, about feeling sort of pressure, expectation, needing to respond instantly to their boss, even when they're on holiday. And these are quite sort of commonly experienced. I mean, obviously it does vary. Not everybody, we have to remember, sort of not everybody uses email all the time in their work, but for those of us who do, then the kinds of experiences are really common. You get a group of people together and they will, come up with these issues time and time again. So yeah, those sort of two sides of the coin, really, are often talked about. But it does, it's important to recognize that all the new possibilities it's affording us as well. And people really do appreciate that. And it has made a lot of things possible that weren't before.
So, Rosie, when you talk about the different possibilities that tech affords us, are you speaking specifically from a productivity perspective in terms of our work, or were you talking more generally in terms of our well-being in the workplace?
Well, I don't know about the productivity side. I suppose what I was more implying is perhaps the way that people are organizing their working lives. And it really does vary by job. In some jobs, it's just, you have to be at a certain place at a certain time. But increasingly, in a lot of sort of more information provision type services, a lot of sort of knowledge services, then there is a lot more flexibility about when that work is taking place. And therefore, if you want to arrange things that, I mean, I've mentioned it already, but childcare is an obvious example about when people are trying to fit together different jobs and maybe not need to pay for full-time childcare, then technology is one way that is enabled.
So, Rosie, you mentioned in passing there the Balance Network, this group of academics dedicated to technology and work-life balance. But can you give us a greater sense of what the group actually does?
Yeah, so the Balance Network is an academic led network which started back in 2013. I'm the principal investigator of that network, and we've run over the past few years, we've run sort of over 20 different events and activities. These have all been in collaboration with a really large number of different partners. So we have sort of academics from over, 55 UK universities plus, a dozen or more international institutions. And these events and activities have covered a really, really wide range of different aspects of essentially work-life balance and digital technologies. Those are our two core themes, and we are very open to membership from anybody interested in those themes. So as well as the academics, we also have quite a number of members who are businesses, whether that be entrepreneurs or more established larger businesses like CIPD, sort of HR management type organizations. But yeah, the kind of activities that we've run have covered themes across the way that technology is used in business travel as well as leisure travel, some of the elements to do with digital technologies and energy demand that I was mentioning earlier, ideas. So there were life swap workshops where people were bringing some of their personal data to share with someone else and see whether that brought new insights. And we've got a number of other events running in November and December this year. I was just at one myself this week, in fact, around the sort of some artistic experiential cafes around embracing technology and refusal of technology. So yeah, the network has been running for a number of years, and we've run lots of different events really, and we run a monthly bulletin as well. So if anyone is interested in signing up for that, then they can find details on the Balance Network website.
So I really like that. I really like the Balance Network because it's so expansive from an intellectual perspective, but also just there are so many people from all over the world that are a part of this and interested in this topic. But one of the pieces of research that came from the Balance Network was this whole idea that technologies and mobile technologies in particular are collapsing this space between the office and home. And I'm wondering if you can just expand on that for the audience. Tell us what that means exactly, and also what the implications are for our own work lives and our well-being.
Absolutely. Well, there's been some really interesting work around this, and I suppose there's a different number of different approaches you can take. And one approach that has been taken, for example, by quite a well-known academic in the States, Ellen Kosek, is around looking at how different individuals kind of feel quite differently about this, actually. So she looked in particular at sort of two different aspects. One is to do with your preference between how separate your home and your work life are. So people will vary on how much they like those to be very distinct or blurred. So that's one sort of dimension, if you like. And then she also looked at how much control people felt that they were able to have over that separation. So as you can imagine, if you like separation and you also feel you're able to achieve separation, then that's going to lead to a sort of more happier outcome, as it were, than if you would really like separation, but you find it impossible to achieve that. So, but equally, it's not true to say that everybody likes to have exact separation. And I think it's quite interesting that sometimes, for example, when employers are looking to try and implement strategies for their employees, they can sometimes be tempted to go down the route of, oh, well, what people really want is clear boundaries, and they want to be able to switch off at 5 and go home and not think about their work. And actually, that's almost in a way, yes, maybe some people will want that, but it's also perhaps not fully embracing the flexibility that the technology allows, and it's not necessarily what will make everyone happier.
So one of the words, Rosie, that you used just then was this idea of control. And it's really interesting, the idea of control with the technologies that we use at work. And other people have used the word empowerment. You know, it gives us the power to choose whether we're going to be at home and work, or if we're going to go to a cafe, or if we're going to go to an office. It gives us that choice. But there are other companies that impose disconnection, almost mandatory disconnection, or enforced digital detoxes, if you like, by shutting email off during certain hours. And this is something that I've spoken to other guests about, and in this very same event. But I'm wondering what your perspective is. Do these interventions actually work?
Well, it's interesting. So there's lots of different things to unpick there. So one point that I really wanted to make about all of this is that, again, if employers are looking to address some of these issues with their workforce, it's important, I think, to recognise that not everything can be done through simply individual empowerment. And also there's a large component which is to do with what you might call the meanings associated with doing that job. So what I mean by that is the kind of messages that we are receiving all the time, explicitly and implicitly, about what it means to be a good employee. And therefore, even if your company is saying, yes, you need to have good work-life balance, we think this is important, if you're still feeling that there is this expectation that in order to be a good employee, you're going to need to respond very swiftly, then it's not going to make a huge deal of difference. And so therefore, you could argue that sometimes when these organizations are putting in place these blanket policies, they are actually making more of a structural change, because they are also changing what is possible for other people, what's possible for their colleagues. They're not going to be competing with someone else, one of their colleagues who can respond quicker, because nobody can respond. So yes, they are taking a different approach. I haven't personally done any work looking into organizations like that have done, these kind of blanket policies. But I think it is interesting that will also be affecting what everybody can do. You're affecting the sort of social expectations around the issue. So you're having a slightly different effect to when you are just simply trying to, as you said, empower individuals. But yes, for some people, that will probably be quite frustrating as well. I know for me, if I was told that I wasn't able to catch up with some of my email in the evening, it would feel quite difficult. Maybe though, it hasn't happened to me. Maybe over time, and if everybody in my organization had to do it, then perhaps I would feel differently. And I'm sure that you adapt, don't you? You do change what you do, and I'd probably would look at it a bit differently. I suppose another issue there is perhaps how much, and this will vary by profession quite considerably, how much your interactions are with people within your own organization versus within other organizations. Because if you are then feeling that you are placed at a significant disadvantage, I mean, I'm an academic, a lot of my work is with external collaborators. If my university put a policy in place which wasn't replicated at other universities, and I was therefore feeling that I was at some kind of disadvantage with these other people who I'm working with regularly, that could feel quite constraining. But in other professions, maybe that's not such a big issue.
So I just want to explore this whole idea of culture change a little bit more, and I just ask the question about whether top-down approaches actually work, but also I'm really interested in I guess design and engineering, and whether you think these kinds of interventions might actually help to increase the level of our well-being in the workplace, or if you think that actually what's needed is more grassroots perspective, whether we need to learn to moderate our own behavior and that will enable us to have better work-life balance.
Yeah, sure. Well, if you're sort of starting to think about it from sort of the individual and what they can do around this area, I mean, there definitely, I do think, in one sense, there's a kind of, well, there's two different ways of putting it. You can either say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Or you can say, sort of like, you've got to be clear about what the problem is that you're trying to solve. So whether that be from an individual point of view or an employer point of view, you've got to be clear on, well, what is it that we think is actually problematic here, so that when we're trying to come up with solutions, we're addressing what we think. And that's going to be different both from individuals, but also from a company perspective. Some companies may see different, maybe they're interested in staff retention, maybe they're interested in, reducing sick leave. And then from an employee point of view, perhaps they're, feeling stressed and having well-being issues there, but sort of being clear on that, I think, is very important. And I think, exactly as you said, from an individual point of view, thinking about your own preferences and really starting conversations around these issues is quite crucial. So we're actually in my group, partly very much inspired by this work that we've been doing with the Balance Network. We're going to be having a workshop talking all about our online habits, offline habits, next week, in fact. So it's going to be really interesting, because you kind of you email people and you kind of get a sense for how they use technology, but you don't necessarily ever have an open conversation. You just kind of learn through your relationships with people about what their preferences seem to be. Maybe sometimes you get them right, maybe sometimes you get them wrong. So I think it's going to be really interesting, discussing that more openly, I guess.
Okay, so Rosie, for those listening, what would you say then is the top takeaway? What's the very top, the thing you would recommend the most to employers and employees that they can take away to enhance the quality of their work-life balance?
Yeah, I mean, exactly as I just said, I definitely think reflecting on what the issues are, what your own preferences are, what your key aims are really with this whole area. And then thinking about starting these conversations with people, definitely trying to just understand things from other people's point of view, I think is a really strong one. But also the other key point I wanted to make is, it's amazing. I mean, I suppose part of the whole reason this is such a fascinating area is the pace of change, and this is exactly why there's sort of increasing research in the area about how technology is changing our lives so rapidly. But that also means, with that pace of change, that we're all sort of struggling to, in some ways, to adapt to, or maybe not struggling, maybe some sort of taking to it like a duck to water, but alongside that, of course, that means that there are this plethora of tools out there and different ways that people are approaching it and coming up with solutions. So I think, for example, I just heard about one this week at this Balance Network event that I mentioned, that I'd not come across before, around a tool called Boomerang, which is around sort of managing your email in a slightly different way. And, I was having a look at it and thinking, actually that could be really, really helpful. So there's a lot out there. But I suppose, as I mentioned before as well, I do think it's important to emphasize that we need to be mindful of the fact it doesn't all come down to individuals. There is this kind of social expectations, and the way that social meanings are constructed is very, very important. And you can do, all that you like to try and support the individual and give them the tools to empower themselves. But if ultimately society is telling us to go in one direction, then we're going to be led by that.
That's great, Rosie. And I think this is a great place to wrap up. Where can people find out more about you and your work?
Absolutely. So take a look at the Balance Network website. You can just Google Balance Network to find that. As I said, there's a link there to sign up to our monthly mailing list. You'll also find information about all the activities that we've run and that are coming up. Soon.